Hey everyone, and welcome to Game Week 20, specifically double Game Week 20. And we are back again with someone that we've had on the show before a long time ago when he scored number one in the world for a week. Peter Armada. How are things going, Peter?
Good, good. Actually, I was going to update you on that. Still don't have the jersey, but the site reached out to me just for people who do have that experience, so they're not worried. They reached out to me on their own and saying that there's been a delay in shipping, but the jersey is on the way. So I'll have to update you guys when I get that in. Otherwise, all well. When Milan wins the Super Copa, beats Juve and Inter on the way, it's always a good week, you know?
But it's not a good week necessarily for fantasy.
Yeah, true.
But what we're gonna do for this, so we're going to go through a couple different questions that we have um, already pre-planned, and then we'll show our teams at the end. If that's the only thing you're kind of interested in, then you can skip ahead for several minutes. I'm not sure how long that's going to be yet. Hopefully that this is going to be a bit more lengthy of an episode than we're probably used to. But we're going to talk about, I have seven different questions here, and I'm sure we'll go off on some tangents as well. We're going to get going with, so the big part of this week is that we're coming off of a blank game week, which you either prepared for or you kind of didn't. But I'd say the general consensus of people that did save their wild card until this point, are using it for this game week. I said in a video at the very start before the season started that I was saving my wild card for this game week specifically because we know that this interrupts the Serie A calendar slightly for those teams that did well in the previous season for the Supercopa. And now, because those teams didn't play last week, they're playing twice this week. So it's the same teams that blanked last week that are doubling this week. We have Juve, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Bologna, Atalanta, and Como. Bologna and Como's fixtures, they did not play in the Supercopa, but they had games assigned that were against teams that did. So that's why they missed as well. So these players are going to be scoring for both games, just as they normally would. Those totals are just going to be added together. So the first question is, do we need 11 double game week players? Because right now, if you were to max out on taking two players from each of those teams, that would give you 12. So it is possible to have a starting 11 of double game week players. But sometimes you're thinking, is the players from that team going to be worth it? And I imagine that most people will have two players from probably Juve, Inter, AC Milan, and Atalanta. But we're going to talk a little bit about Como and Bologna and see, do we need 11 double game week players to have a full 22 fixtures in our fantasy teams? So I'll let you go ahead first, Peter. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, again, when I was making my squad for this week, I also wild carded along with most people. I think I'll touch on the 11 game week players first. So, ideally, in an ideal scenario, yeah, you want 11 double game week players for sure. I think though, where the debate came up for me when I was deciding my squad was, is there going to be a situation where a keeper or defender specifically is going to have an easier matchup where they get the two half clean sheets. And if they're a fullback, maybe even an assist or a center back, a goal on a corner, right? If you can get a defender with two half clean sheets and a contribution offensively, you're looking at anywhere between upwards of 10, 12, 14 points, which, if you get a double game week player who has a harder couple fixtures, they could get no clean sheets, play two full 90s, and still end up with like 6 points. So that was really my consideration. And the keeper comes into play there as well. So personally, I know we're a little teaser for later. We're going to show our squads. I'm actually going with 10 double game week players, but I'm interested to see what you think about yours. What did you do? Yeah.
I am, especially in Serie A fantasy, I am full commit on if you can get the double game week players, get them in. It could be Venezia and Cagliari in the double game week, and I'd probably still try to have at least three, if not four of those players, because in this game week, counter to a lot of people kind of segue into Serie A fantasy from Fantasy Premier League. But what the difference is you can get 3 points just for playing in the match because it's based on 0 to 30, 60 to or 30 to 60 and 60 to 90. And especially for midfielders and defenders, you're getting clean sheets based on the half, not the full game. So you can rely on a team can concede and you can still get relatively good points. So I do have 11 in mind, meaning that if that's the case, you do have to have at least someone from Como. I imagine that would be the team that if people were leaving people off, that would probably be the team to leave them off. Because I'm just thinking, even if it's a striker that doesn't have the ability to get um, clean sheet points, as long as it's a player that's nailed on and plays 90 minutes, you're looking at minimum 6 points so long as they're not getting discipline, yellow cards, and red cards. That basically covers any other striker that gets one attacking return with only one game.
Mhm.
So that's where my brain kind of went with that. Is you're that and playing an extra game, I almost think of it as starting off with an assist.
Mhm.
Like you're kind of getting those 3 points right away. The issue does come is where you do need to be picking a player that will be featuring in both of those games, as it's normally the talismanic players or like a center back or something that is going to be playing the full 90 in two straight games, where there will be a lot of rotation. But that's where I went. So I do have a full 11. Um, Playing in my double game week squad. But if you're not having a Como player, like there's only a few that I would probably consider. Uh, Maybe I'll lead this into kind of the next question as well, as one of the
Mhm.
topics we're covering is whether you should be going for a more expensive or a cheaper keeper. But like Como, maybe you put as their keeper, although they do have two tough fixtures this game week. Not only is it the worst team in the double game week, but they also have the toughest two fixtures being Lazio and Milan. Um, so maybe the keeper, if that's where you want to put that towards, you'd maybe imagine that one out of four halves they're not going to get scored on. There's probably a decent chance that that's going to occur. Um, and then if you're looking for more of a forward option, Catrone is probably the striker of choice, or Pats, who hopefully, if you have him, would still be on penalties at that point, even though he missed his last one. But that's kind of where my idea went with that theory of 11 or not.
Yeah, and a lot of those points are very valid. And that's what I wrestled with as well. Literally, and we'll talk about this more when we go into the squads. The reason I stuck with, and to your point, it was a keeper. That was my non-double game week player. I've always had Vasquez from Empoli. They have Lecce this week, so really, really good chance. Double clean sheet, both halves. And he's also really cheap, which helped me fit other players in. And I just like what Empley's been doing defensively. A lot of points coming from them on the back line. So I just thought that's something I would keep moving forward. And also, like you said, a lot of my double game week players are between Milan, Juve, Inter, Atalanta. So when you look at the Como and Bologna side of things, I was looking at, okay, all those other 8 players from the big teams are all outfield players for me. And I know that'll be something we'll talk about in a bit. But so then I'm looking at the keeper for Como or Bologna. Now, obviously, yes, they can pick up a half clean sheet or maybe two. But when you look at those fixtures, like you said, they do have tough games. So, what are the odds they don't get scored on in a lot of those halves against those big teams? They're obviously lower. So, that was my idea for the keeper there. But to your point about Como or Bologna, still think worth investing in for sure. Like you said, Cutrone, Nico Paz. Cutrone especially has really come on, improved valuable in the last couple games. Paz in his last 3 games, 12, 5, and 9 points. So
Just you
really,
know,
really good value. He's actually the one I went with.
Catrone is definitely going to be up for the Milan game too, though, wanting to
Yes,
score against his, and that's a home game as well.
Yes, and any Milan fan out there knows our former players are going to score against us. So Cutrone is probably a good bet there. However, I would also add on that, not just the Milan angle for Cutrone, Milan and Lazio, both who Como are playing, have proven to leak goals a lot lately, even when they win games. Like they don't get many clean sheets. So I went with Paz, and we're going to look at that after. But I think either him or Cutrone is a good call. For Bologna, for me, Skorupski's been pretty good value in net. Again, it's just his 2 tough matchups that kind of steered me away from him. But I've had Roman Freuler for a long time, and he has just been a very consistent, cheap stat line player. So I kept him in the lineup, and I thought, okay, hopefully he can get me some points for cheap there. So that's kind of my mentality between the double game week and the Como Bologna players.
Fair enough. Oh, good point. So, next topic we're going to talk about is one that's going to be right down your alley, and you're probably going to have more to input on this than me being a Milan fan. But there's been three kind of Milan midfielders that are all hitting at different times, kind of thing, and all of them have experienced some time on rotation as well, and different times in form as well. So we're looking at which Milan midfielder or midfielders are you planning on targeting, as well as Teo Hernandez as a defender. If someone's investing in the defense, normally he'd be the go-to, but he has also been sat a lot this year. Now, I don't know how much the new manager is going to impact things, if that's having he's back as a number one in the lineup. And I don't know if he's going to be the penalty taker as he has in the past as well. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, specifically the Milan midfield and defense? Because I don't think many people are going to be investing in Morata or Tammy Abraham.
Stay away from Morata. Tammy gets goals, but not fantasy worthy goals. Okay, so I think the one disclaimer I would say, having watching all their games this season, and the most recent ones under Conceição and in the Copa, Super Copa, if you are picking between any of Reindeers, Pulisic, Leao, and I would still say Teo, any two of those four, I think you're in good shape right now. I wouldn't really touch anyone else on the Milan roster besides that. Now, which ones would I go with? So I've gone with Reindeers and Pulisic for this double game week. Reindeers brings the value in fantasy of having a pretty cheap price. Okay, I think he's only 7 mil, if I understand, or six, something in
Something
between that,
around there, yeah.
something around there. Yeah, we'll see in a second. His current form has been he's been one of the best players in Serie A in the most in recent weeks at least. And really, what people were concerned with was when Conceição comes in, change the formation. Is he still going to provide offensive gains? Well, really, he has. If you watch the games, even if he hasn't actually returned in the last match, he's right up there in the play. He's getting in the box, making late runs. They're cutting balls back to him. He's getting shots. He just hasn't found the net as of most recent. But him and Pulisic, if you watch the games together, they still are combining. The two of them haven't missed a beat. And Pulisic has still proven to be our main man. Penalties, he creates a lot. So when you factor in the price of Reindeers, the fact that him and Pulisic are still getting forward and creating, I think those two are the way to go. Now, Liao, when he is there, and I know we've had this discussion before, he definitely drives play. They play a lot through him on the left. He's a very frustrating player because he doesn't score as often as he should, at least for what people perceive him to be. But he's definitely good for creating chances. He can get assists that way. And lately, he has been, since he came back in the lineup, it seems like he has more confidence again. So I would tap him to get offensive inclusions moving forward. However, he in fantasy, though, does bring a big price tag. So you have to factor that into your decision. And with that, I would also jump onto the Teo bandwagon, where Teo, when he's on his game, as most of us know, at the beginning of the season, he's like your can't miss defender. But at a 7 mil price tag for a defender, where, like you said, he hasn't been playing a lot recently, it's a tough one. I definitely do think, based on what I've seen from the matches and from what Conceição has said, I think Teo's going to be playing regularly again. That's for sure. However, when you factor in Serie A, like you said, defender points are really valuable and easy to get compared to other fantasies. You could get, a couple Napoli defenders or a couple Fiorentina defenders who might bring you equal to, if not more, returns than Teo for less of a cost. So I think Teo's going to play, and I think when he plays, he drives play. You saw he scored a free kick recently too. That's something he has in his arsenal. But for the value versus the return, my money right now is on Reinders and Pulisic. What did you have going forward from them?
So as the blank game week locked, meaning that if you go to the next tab now, you can start setting your team for game week 20, the double game week. So I clicked my wild card right away. And just as a disclaimer, because we do have unlimited transfers and we show you our teams tonight, that could change depending on
Yeah.
things. But if you are up to date and following the Twitter account, you know that I will announce any changes that I make prior to game weeks there. So that's just a little disclaimer. But right after I clicked that button, I made my team. I have two different Milan players than when I originally had. Originally, I did have Reindeers and I had Gabia as my defender, just because he's been completely nailed on 100%, playing 90 minutes all the time. And you're gonna see this as well when it comes to show my Inter players as well, is I'm I'm almost wondering if playing 90 minutes should trump attacking threat nowadays,
Mhm.
because it's almost like if you if your defender gets scored on in the first half, then it's very likely that you will not have much of a return unless they score a goal or get an assist at the game. And so that's where my thought went. Now, generally, Teo Hernandez is one that isn't getting subbed off too often anyway. He's like your attacking threat 90-minute player, kind of like Di Lorenzo is. Um, so I did pick Teo Hernandez, and I don't know if this Super Copa match like just swayed me way too much, like watching that, but like seeing Reindeers not return, seeing Pulisic and Teo Hernandez return significantly in that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just kind of completely flipped where I was going with the Milan players. Um, and I had 7.8 in the bank with the other two. So I was like, I'm going to spend a bit more of my money. And
Mhm.
the thing is, either of if Reindeers does get back into form, it's much easier to go from a Pulisic down to a Reindeers rather than vice versa.
Mhm.
Um, Before I go on too much further, do we know why Pulisic has the yellow flag on him right now?
I feel like that's I haven't been as you know, like I haven't been on this fantasy app for a long time, but I'm just wondering if maybe that's something they have to just remove for the next game week because
I,
he definitely played. You know
Yeah,
what I
he
mean?
played in the Super Copa.
Yeah.
He played the full amount. He didn't get injured or anything. So
No.
I don't think the yellow flag is something to be concerned about at all.
No.
I don't know,
If
for maybe
I
people that don't watch these videos, maybe it'll be something that scares people away, and then that could actually help the owners of Pulisic at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would
Um,
just quickly jump in just for people who, as someone who watches Milan like religiously and people who may not watch, to your point, like if you're looking at cheap Milan alternatives that have been seemingly in their stat line performing, like Gabia, Jimenez, I just, the way the Super Copa went the last two matches, I wouldn't stick with those guys. It's nice that they're cheap. And like Jimenez, especially, he had a good little run there at the end of Fonseca's tenure. But it just seems like with Leao back in form, Tomori's back in form as well, and Conceição has said he wants to get him back to firing again what he used to be. I don't think Gabia and Jimenez are nailed on options for people anymore.
Sounds good. Cool. Okay, that's actually really good to know then. And so we're going to move on from Peter's team, and then I'll lead the discussion now onto my team in Juventus and where to put the Juventus investment. I don't think many people are looking at Vlahovic as an option right now. He hasn't really been in form at all. So I think it really comes down to, are you picking a midfielder and a defender if you're investing twice in Juve, which I imagine a lot of people with Wildcard are doing, or do you go the two defender route, as Juve, in history at least, has been known to be a very good defensive team in the world of football, not just in Serie A itself. I Since a lot of the like retirements in the last 5 years, that's changed slightly. They're not maybe as much of a powerhouse as they were, but they still do have a good back line for the most part. But I guess if I'm investing in Juve, I'm not sure I would go double defense based on the other players that I want on my team. Um, if I was to pick a player when I show my squad that I am most concerned that wouldn't start both games, it's probably Yildiz based on how he has been rotated so much. For a player of his caliber, I'm kind of surprised the amount that he's been rotated. But I think based on the way he plays when he does start and when he subs on at a price point of 5.2, I think it makes sense to still have him in the team. I don't really know if there's anyone else in the midfield that I want. I mean, Conceição can be explosive, but then there's like Mbangula doesn't play regularly. Uh, who has a Coop Miners, hasn't really shown consistent form. Nico Gonzalez been out injured a lot. Like there's a lot of different options in there. McKennie's been playing defense more than he's been playing in the midfield. So like there's not a whole lot, I think, for midfield options that I'm interested in beyond Yildiz. But I think that does also come with almost the expectation that he's probably starting on the bench in one of those games. Um, Another thing to potentially think about, actually, I'll leave that later on because it's not part of the conversation. So then it's the defender that to also go along with it. And I'm gonna go back to the pairing that I used to have with Yildiz and Cambiaso, I think. I just like his attacking threat. Obviously, Cambiaso had like a major mistake against Fiorentina that kind of cost them the win in the last game before Supercopa, where he like slipped and gave away the ball. But now he's back from his injury. I expect him to be firing again, creating opportunities down the line. The other player that I might consider is Gatti, I guess, just for his attack. He honestly looks like he's playing striker more than Vlahovic. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
frustrating. I don't like how forward he gets because it we end up opening ourselves up at the back a lot and doesn't end up going well more often. But he is someone that is around the goal a lot on corners, crossing in and stuff like that. That if you do get an attacking return from a defender, then clean sheets are kind of bonus from there on out because you've banked those points with a goal, and now great. If you can keep half clean sheets, then even better. So the goal threat is there from him, but he's kind of like your Bonucci light, kind of not quite that point, but has that I guess similar playing mentality. So I think that's where I would go there. What did you do with Juve?
Yeah, a lot of similar thoughts to you. So considered this one for a while. Honestly, I wanted to pick Vlahovic, but he just hasn't given me enough to pick him. So that kind of made my decision harder. So I went with one defender, one midfielder. Yildiz as well. Honestly, even though he wasn't supposed to start and Conceição got hurt, which was another reason I kind of stayed away from him. Uh, in the Supercopa. That goal he scored against Milan kind of encouraged me a bit. I was like, okay, it seems like he's firing still when he gets the chance. So I'm hoping, like you said, even if he only starts one of the two matches, if he comes in for a bit role, he could still provide a moment of magic. So I'm going to bank on that. And for that price, you can't go wrong. My defender, I actually did go with Gatti. What turned me away, I've had Cambiaso for a lot of the season. I got rid of him recently because he kind of had a dip there where he got injured and then he wasn't playing a lot. So I didn't really notice him in the Supercopa much. So I just kind of figured that, and Gatti was Milan's best striker when we played you. I, like you said, to your point, everything you said, I like how Gatti gets forward from a fantasy perspective. Juve, their fixture, the one thing that kind of scared me a bit was that Atalanta fixture. But if Gatti can go and get, or Cambiaso even could go and get 2 out of 3, 2 out of 4, or 3 out of 4 clean sheets and an attacking return, that's a pretty solid haul for a double game week. So yeah, Gatti and Yildiz is where I
Yeah,
went.
and those are two very difficult attacking fixtures, both away
Mhm.
games. And Torino is one of the hardest teams to score against. That's why you invest in Milinkovic, Savic, and Coco often because it's just a
Mhm.
hard team to score. And then you're facing number one in the league in Atalanta as well.
Yep.
So both away games, it does pose a bit of a risk. But again, I'm going to be taking two of them in the double game week regardless.
Mhm.
Okay. Then we will move on from the Juve players and go to the age-long debate of Thuram or Lautaro. So it has been very much of a theme this year so far, that they just trade form. It's just Lautaro's bagging goals all the time, Thuram's doing nothing, and then it switches. And I swear it's like switched like that 4 or 5 times now. And we are just recently, I think we are currently in the middle of a Lautaro form right now the last couple Serie A matches, and then he was the one that scored in the Supercopa final as well. And me personally, I think I am sticking with Chirem from what I no, that's not good. Um, did you see that pop up?
Yeah, keep it
Okay.
going. There you go.
Sorry, this might cut out at some point. Maybe I'll have to upload in two different things. Um, and so. Maybe I'll do a separate upload. This will be a talks one, and then we can do a team reveal one as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Yeah.
Um, and so I'm gonna be going with Trem because the price value, because it's just it's too hard to call the flip-flop when they're going to change form to keep going between the two. Um, and as for I was really excited by the fact that Trem did not start in the final.
Mhm.
So I find that for the really big matches, so for a final, for a midweek Champions League game, I feel like they're more likely to rest Lautaro Martinez than they would be for Trem. Because that Lautaro is their big hitter at the end of the day. And the only unfortunate thing is probably Lautaro will be the one to take a penalty, which you wouldn't have with Trem, but that's what you're paying for at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's where I went with that. And we might need to pick up our conversations kind of quickly here. So you go ahead on that.
Yeah, it's okay. Part one and part two. Yeah, went with Turam, exact same thing. Yeah, Lotaro came to life, but really Turam's been so dominant, you can't doubt him. Bit of a worry when he went off in the semis injured, but I read all the reports. It was a precaution, and like you said, I'm glad they held him out of the final. They obviously value their run in Serie A and they want to win the title. So I think he's going to be firing on all cylinders when he returns.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. We'll keep that nice and short. Then okay, if you, because I know this is one you wanted to speak on. I didn't know where we stood with the injury to him, if he was back yet, but I'll let you speak to a big player that a lot of people had from Atalanta before he got injured was Retegui, and whether we're bringing him back in or not.
Yep. So again, this one's one that was struggling with for me. Looked it up. I am bringing him in, and I'm keeping him for the double game week. It seems like, based on all reports, he should be back and playing in both games. The question mark is how much is he going to play? It sounds like he will start one of the two. We just don't know which one, and then he might feature for the second. So with his return, Atalanta scoring so many goals, I think if he's going to play, you get him in there. And the upside is also in the future moving forward when he's healthy, right? You keep him in your squad. So I think it was a no-brainer. I kept him.
Okay, and the last question is because you can only have a maximum of 12 if you want to absolutely max out on double game week players, which non-double game week players are you bringing in? And so for me, first of all, if you're picking someone with 2 games, they're going to feature at some point. So don't pick someone, put them on the bench, hoping they sub in at some point. It won't happen. Unless like the game week locks and then they get injured in training or something and they don't play. Your full 11 is going to be playing if they have double game weeks. But for me personally, my bench, my backup keeper Suzuki. I think he's been fantastic this year. He's I think the cheapest goalie in the league. I don't know if there's any 3.6s anymore. I see he's risen to 3.8 now. Um, but that was an obvious choice for me. I have no issues with him. The rest of mine, there are two different ways I went about thinking. One was looking at the next week's fixtures after the blank. It's a very tough game week with a lot of the big clubs playing each other. So I wanted to make sure I had players that weren't in that tough fixture situation, as well as the last team that's also going to be doubling this year is Fiorentina out of them because of a made-up fixture. And I thought, why not have two of those in? Because when that fixture gets announced, those are transfers I won't have to make at a later time. Um, so right now I have two Fiorentina players on the bench, which we'll see in the next video, and I kept Di Lorenzo because how could I not have Di Lorenzo? I'm actually kind of worried that he's going to be on my bench during this week, um, but that's who's there in that other spot. Suzuki, Di Lorenzo, and two Fiorentina players to be shown later. How about you?
Same thoughts for a lot of it. So I told you, starting keeper, I got Vasquez of Empoli. I've kept him. Kept Di Lorenzo of Napoli because it's Di Lorenzo. And I also kept Gosens of Fiorentina with the future forward thinking in mind. I brought in two non-double players with my wild card. One was Keane, same as you, with the idea on the future, the fact that he's been on fire. Like I'd start that guy for Italy today if we could. And the other guy I brought in was actually who was someone on my squad originally who I got rid of, but I'm going back to him. My backup keeper this week is Spilar. Roma has just really found their form under Ranieri, and their fixtures moving forward the next few weeks look pretty favorable. Good clean sheet guy, and he's pretty cheap for fantasy, 4.6. So I thought I'd bring him in, and I'm pretty confident with Vasquez and Spilar moving forward in net.
All right. So we're going to call it there for answering all of these questions. And please just click on the next video to see what the wildcard teams look like. See you soon.